Today, rumors started circling as to what the NBA timeline for a return to basketball would be. Keith Smith tweeted out, "Rough NBA timeline that was mentioned to me from a team executive today. Early June, players will get back in facilities. Mid to late June, they'll do their camp. Early July, they'll travel to a single site. Mid-July, they'll start playing games. Labor Day-ish, the season will end. Mid-September draft, week later free agency, then the next season will start on Christmas." Now, I have a problem with this timetable because that would mean shortening the season to 70 games. Basically, if the NBA was to finish out the 82-game regular season and then run the schedule through the playoffs, they'd have to restart the first week of July in order to finish by the last week of September. But with this timetable, if they start in mid-July and end around Labor Day-ish, that suggests a 70-game regular season. And now every point I'm going to make in this video is based on the idea that the NBA will go forward with a 70-game regular season and then not have any sort of play-in. Because I would think if they were looking at some sort of play-in, that would be listed on this rough draft of a schedule. So if there is some sort of play-in, then that would change my tune on this. But if the NBA goes forward with a 70-game regular season and then goes straight to playoffs, I think that is the worst idea they could possibly have for restarting the season. Now let me just say, I don't know why they have to wait until mid-July to restart games. Obviously, I don't know everything that goes into this, but it doesn't really make sense that most players can be in facilities right now. They could all return June 1st. They can start their camp in mid-June, but then they'd have to wait until mid-July to start games. I do not understand why with that timetable they couldn't start the first week of July in order to get a full regular season in. I don't understand why they'd have to wait till mid-July. I also don't understand why they'd have to end around Labor Day. I know the NFL starts up in September, but honestly, if I was controlling the NBA, if I had a say in this, I would have the season end in late September and I'd just schedule my playoff games for days that the NFL does not play. Fans are starved for sports. There still might be some sort of lockdown or quarantine measures in September. I'm not entirely sure. In that scenario, the NBA would still draw very good ratings for conference finals or NBA finals games that are played on Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. Shoot, not many people like Thursday football. I think the NBA could compete with Thursday night football. But honestly, I mean, you look at it on one hand, all 30 NBA teams could play an extra 12 or so regular season games, and the NBA could compete with the NFL on some days during its conference finals and NBA finals run. Or all 30 teams can play 12 less regular season games and you don't compete with the NFL. For monetary reasons, the league might make more money with the first option than with the second option. So the whole argument that, oh, the NBA shouldn't finish the regular season because then it'd be pushing the playoffs too late into September and they'd have to compete with the NFL. The argument that they shouldn't do that because it'd make them less money doesn't make sense to me because I don't think they would make less money. But based on this timetable, it appears they're not looking to do so. Based on this timetable, every team that isn't currently in playoff position wouldn't really have a chance of making the playoffs. The Portland Trailblazers are 3.5 games behind the Memphis Grizzlies, and with 5 or 6 games left to play, I don't think the Portland Trailblazers are going to catch Memphis. Basically, you'd have 14 teams work for a month on a return. They'd fly to one city for what, 2 weeks? And players on those teams will be either staying in a bubble so they don't get the coronavirus, just in order to play 5 meaningless games, or they won't stay in a bubble because it's not going to be a forced thing from the NBA where players have to stay in a hotel or in a quarantined area. So you'll have players on these teams that are really playing for nothing. You'll have them not care, probably go out in public. Who knows what they do, but you'd have guys that would probably be careless and put the rest of the NBA at stake, just so these teams can play 5 meaningless games. Now, in this scenario, the only reason the NBA would be having every team play a total of 70 games is for monetary reasons. TV deals require at least 70 of 82 games to be played in order to pay out their full amount of money. I don't know exactly how it works, but basically, NBA teams have to play 30 games to get as much money as possible. So the NBA would only be having these teams put all that effort in to come down there to play 5 or 6 games just in order for everybody to make more money. And I mean, that makes sense. Businesses are businesses. They're going to try and make as much money as possible, especially in a time like this when a lot of them are struggling. And the NBA will be completely fine, but they're no different. It's a business. Still, you take a lot of risk putting teams that have no chance at anything in that situation for only 5 games. If you finish the regular season and they could play 15, 16 games, you'd have a lot more teams with a chance at the playoffs, especially in the Western Conference, and that's a lot more experience and development that players on really bad teams could get. There'd be a lot more to gain for every team in that situation. Everybody feels like they have a fair chance since it's just a continuation of what was supposed to happen, and it's just what makes the most sense in my mind. All you have to do is add an extra 3 to 3.5 weeks onto this. Start a week earlier, end 2 weeks later, something like that. It's not like finishing out the entire regular season would be that drastically different from this timetable that Keith Smith tweeted out today. But the main problem I have with this is for teams like the Portland Trail Blazers. In this scenario, it pretty much makes sense for the Portland Trail Blazers to simply tank because you're really not going to catch the Memphis Grizzlies in 5 games when you're 3.5 back. I mean, yes, you hypothetically could, but the chance is so low that it makes no sense to risk Damian Lillard's health, to risk Zach Collins' health, to risk Yusuf Nurkic's health, to risk CJ McCollum. It makes no sense to even send those guys to wherever they're supposed to play games to play, especially when Portland, by losing these games, would have a great chance of rising all the way up to the 11th spot. They're only a half game behind or ahead of San Antonio for that 11th spot in the draft lottery. Their chances from winning the lottery quadruple by going from 14 to 11. Their chances of getting into the top 4 almost quadruple as well. Meanwhile, they are 3.5 games behind Memphis, and Portland would only have 4 more games left to get to 70, and Memphis would have 5. Portland would essentially have to win all 4, with Memphis losing all 5, for Portland not to have to worry about a tiebreaker, because right now, Memphis owns that tiebreaker. So if Portland didn't play a game against Memphis, they'd have to win out, Memphis would have to lose out. Who knows what teams would play which if the NBA did return? I assume Portland would play Memphis once. If they did and Portland ended up beating Memphis, the head-to-head matchup would be 1-1, so then who knows who'd win the tiebreaker, but regardless, the chances would be very, very, very slim that Portland could work their way into the playoffs. Instead, you get up to that 11 seed, you got a good chance of getting the number 1 pick. And disclaimer, that was my first chance trying to do that. I did not try that over and over again. Got a little bit lucky first try. But yeah, it makes no sense for Portland to even try to win those meaningless games, especially since they're getting screwed out of a real chance to make the playoffs, because the remaining schedule for the Memphis Grizzlies was probably the hardest in the NBA. The remaining schedule for the Portland Trail Blazers was one of the easiest. Memphis has had a very easy schedule up until this point, while Portland has had a very tough one. I guarantee you, if they had played each other's schedules, that Portland would be ahead right now. But in this situation, Memphis would catch a break because they would get excused from a very hard portion of their schedule since it'd be shortened from 16 games to 5, and who knows who they'd schedule Memphis for if they shorten that to 5. Portland wouldn't get to play probably the easiest stretch of its schedule so far. So it's just a bad break for the Portland Trail Blazers, and you're putting them in a position where they can have their guys work their ass off to come back and probably play meaningless games, possibly risk their health due to the pandemic, possibly risk their health due to injuries which have snake-bitten the Trailblazers all season long. They'd get screwed out of a really good chance to make the playoffs if the season finished as normal, because the Blazers were getting healthy for an easy part of their schedule and Memphis had the hardest part of their schedule yet to come. Basically, in this scenario, Portland would just get severely screwed over, but they'd still be asked to go to Orlando or Las Vegas or wherever and risk their health in order to make some money. The thing is, if Portland played an extra 4 or 5 games with a lineup consisting of Anthony Simons, Gary Trent Jr., Jalen Horde, Nasir Little, and Wenyen Gabriel, Portland would still make their money. All the players would still get paid. So if they're going to get screwed over while still being asked to play, you might as well just send some young bench guys, have them play a little bit. Maybe they'll develop a little bit. Sit Dame, CJ, Nurkic, Ariza, Melo, sit those guys at home. Now the NBA would probably have a problem with that. The Blazers might even get fined for doing that, but if that happened, that would be a really, really bad look for the NBA. And I still think that'd be a good thing for the Blazers regardless, because you wouldn't have to take that risk with the players, and then you'd also gain some ground in the lottery. Portland would probably lose all those games, possibly get up to 11th in the lottery, which would give them a fighter's chance at making it into the top 4 and possibly winning the whole entire thing, like we just saw the San Antonio Spurs do on Tankathon. And you don't risk your players' health. So if the NBA shortens the season to 70 games, the Blazers shouldn't send Dame and their key guys down there. Now, if there is an 8 versus 9 play-in, then yeah, you try and win, you try and keep a hold of that 9th seed, and then you try and beat Memphis in order to get to the playoffs. I do think there's a decent chance that they do that, but I'm worried that the NBA might be dumb enough to shorten the season to 70 games and then just go straight into playoffs without any sort of play-in. And in that scenario, Portland should tank. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section below. I'm looking forward to reading some of your comments, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later. As always, peace out. Go Blazers.